welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm your host, Edward Russell, and this week I'm joined by my co-host, Jay Shabat, to discuss Virgin Atlantic and EasyJet in a very British affair. Enjoy. Hey, Jay, how you doing this post-Thanksgiving week?
Good, Ned. Did you have a good holiday?
I did. Thankfully, did not fly. I did drive. But, when I say thankfully, I think about it, we actually had a pretty good Thanksgiving. Things went pretty smooth in the U.S. There were that many flight cancellations. A lot of people traveled. It was a good holiday for airlines.
Yeah, that was good to see. Busiest holiday ever busiest Thanksgiving ever for the U.S. airlines. And at the same time, not seem to be, as you suggested, operationally pretty sound. So knock on wood. Hopefully, we'll get the same for the upcoming winter holidays here. So so far so good on that front.
Absolutely. So we're talking here on Thursday, November 30th, and I'm just back from New York, where I had the chance to talk to Virgin Atlantic CEO Shai Weiss after the airline's sustainable aviation fuel demonstration flight. I called it a stunt, and he corrected me and that I was wrong on Tuesday. So that was interesting.
Yeah, we're going to do an all British podcast today. So I suggested that we do it in a British accent. Ned said that that probably wouldn't be a good idea.
I think our listeners would leave us in mass if we both tried to use very bad British accents today.
You're probably right. Yeah, that's let's stick to our own American accents. But we are going to be talking about the British aviation scene. So Ned, what did you learn about Virgin in your meeting?
Well, first up, Virgin Weiss is very confident that Virgin is on track to deliver the pre-tax profit that they've been promising next year. Now, if you recall, Jay and I were just discussing this, but Virgin lost a lot of money, over about $1 billion from 2020 to 2022 on an operating basis, and that is far more than the money that they made during the past Yes, they lost far more than they made during the past decade, and Jay summarized it well. How did you put it, Jay?
Just in terms of their history. Yeah, I think what I was saying is that they have not a terribly strong record of profitability going back to you can go back to the very early days in the 80s. And I think what I said to you, Ned, is that Virgin in a good year for them makes a modest profit, but typically they lose money. That's kind of been historically their situation.
Right, and that's with big investments from Singapore Airlines for many years and Delta Airlines since, 2014 that they took their 49% stake. So, Virgin is not a big profit maker in the industry by any stretch of the imagination.
It really isn't. They did, for the record, if you exclude special accounting items, they say that, and again, let's be clear here, that Virgin Atlantic is not a publicly traded company. They do not publish quarterly financial statements, nor even, for that matter, semi-annual, or I don't even think they do annual. I think they just do a press release. They may have annual financial statements that you could look at. But in any case, they did, in their press release for 2022, they did say they earned a small operating profit, excluding special items. The margin on that, though, was just 2%. So, and 2022 was that was kind of a strange year coming out of the pandemic. I don't want to hold them to the fire for that year in particular. But if you go back, I think same thing in like 2019. See if I can pull up my notes here quickly, but my 2019, I believe they did also earn an operating profit, but a very modest one.
Yeah, net loss, but it's
net loss for sure. And so you can that's kind of been the pattern over time. And so when Singapore Airlines bought them back, whenever that was, it was like, I believe right before 9/11, I want to say late 90s. They thought they had this grand plan. Oh yeah, we can, by buying 49% of Virgin Atlantic, we can have this great Heathrow access, and Heathrow is going to be this it's going to be a great place to be going forward. And as it turns out, Singapore Airlines just lost a lot of money on that. They wound up selling it to Delta, as you said, more than a decade later for a fraction of the price. Now for Delta, I think it's worked out well. Delta never really bought it. I don't think they bought it as a financial investment. In fact, I know they didn't buy it as a financial investment. It was more a strategic investment. And their network benefits a lot by having Virgin's flights, particularly into markets like New York. Delta just becomes a lot more relevant in that market.
Right. Virgin is
being
able to feed
yeah.
Delta's U.S. network with London nonstops from many gateways, whereas for Singapore Airlines, it never really did the same from Singapore, just because the U.S. is such a large market. But aside, so Weiss did comment briefly on the joint venture, very positive about it, and it's with Delta, Air France, and KLM. I asked his thoughts on SAS potentially joining the joint venture. He said he's hopeful that they will do that. Of course, that's subject to first court approval and then regulatory approval on Air France, KLM investing in SAS. But back to Virgin's key business, like you said, they do a lot of transatlantic flying. Not surprisingly, Virgin Atlantic, and he said demand this winter looks really good, especially for leisure and premium leisure travel. One of the things that we know, if you look at DO, Virgin does a lot of sun flying during the winter, which is good because there are fewer people that want to go between London and Boston or London and New York in the winter. And corporate demand, he said, corporate demand volume is only back to about 80% of 2019 levels. So, they need to look at leisure markets. And he said bookings are very strong this winter. Now, for 2024, like I said, he's confident on a profit, but he said he's neutral on the outlook. There's a lot of macro concerns. There's still questions about the global economy, even though those have been swirling now for almost 2 years. Conflict in Israel and in Ukraine are affecting, but he's still positive about that profit.
Yeah, that's all good info, and interesting point about as the Caribbean markets and Florida, as European airlines go, Virgin is not too seasonal. They've got of course all these European carriers do so much better in the summer than the winter. We're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to EasyJet, but they in Virgin's case they do have all that Caribbean and Florida flying, which is very important to them, big part of their overall network. They also have their holidays division, which I think does very well. So that is helpful. I think one on the other side of the coin, one thing that's always hurt Virgin is that it just doesn't have a short haul network. So it just doesn't have it really relies a lot on local nonstop traffic. People originating in London going to New York, or originating in London going to Los Angeles or wherever. Now, I think, and you pointed
I got
out,
a chance to actually ask him about that, and yes, they are definitely reliant on the London local at least the UK local traveler. But Weiss said about 3,000 passengers a day connect over Heathrow, and I backed into a number. They've got 8,500 seats roughly, so it's about a third of their traffic is connecting, give or take.
Yeah, and that's when you told me that earlier today, Ned. And by the way, we should always say when we're talking, it's Thursday morning, right? Yeah,
Yes.
Thursday morning. So November 30th. Yeah, you told me that this morning, Ned, and it actually surprised me a little bit. I thought that number would have been a little lower. And I think what it is, I think India has been a very good connecting market for them, taking US to India traffic over London. That is a very competitive market, but it's also at the same time, it's a very capacity constrained market because the Gulf carriers aren't, it's not an open skies agreement, Gulf India. So there's not as much capacity between North America and India via the Gulf as there otherwise would be if you had open skies. So there's, I think Virgin does well with that.
And remember too, while American and United have made amends and partners in the Gulf, Delta has not. So Delta needs its feed over London, Amsterdam, Paris to access India right now.
Yeah, and I wonder. I wonder how much. It'd be interesting to know how many Indian passengers Delta will send, via London versus via Amsterdam or Paris. That's they all kind of, in a sense, compete against each other, but I think that's been a pretty good market for. Well, we know it can't be that bad because they're adding a new Indian market, right?
Yes, Bangalore comes online next year.
Yeah. So that sense that they, that's a sense that they're probably doing pretty well there and obviously see more potential there. Yeah, some of the middle. I think Israel has been a good connecting U.S. Israel over London. I'd have to imagine like a Lagos, same thing, like very limited capacity between North America and Africa. I think they do well in that. So yeah, I guess when you start to think about that way, the 30% figure on the connecting traffic that you mentioned, Ned, is perhaps not that surprising as maybe I first reacted. But yeah, it's still, I still think the bread and butter, I think we know the bread and butter for Virgin is, New York, London, New York, sunshine to Caribbean in the winter. I'm sure LA is a good market for them.
Yes. And he
So
said,
yeah,
they're
that's
suspending Austin because of the slow recovery in the tech
mm,
sector, among reasons.
yeah.
And I asked what he's going to do with those planes, and he talked about, more LA, more Miami. Those are good markets for them. So, yeah, like you said, LA sounds like it is a good market, even with the writer strike and actor strike that are now over. So, but yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's yeah, going back to the Delta lines, you can imagine, just picture an investment bank in New York, Morgan Stanley, and they have to decide, who are we going to fly to London? They're probably going, they have like thousands of employees going all day long, London, New York, London. I had a friend of mine used to call it the nylon market, NYLON, and just constantly. I mean, it's just like it's heavily trafficked market. And you can picture, Delta walking into Morgan Stanley, before 2013 or whatever it was when they did the Virgin deal, and saying, "Hey, you want to do a contract with us?" And Morgan Stanley's like, "Nah, well, you can't really give us as what we needed, for London, but with Virgin they can." So that makes Delta very competitive in that market. And New York is, yeah, just so New York, London is just so big. London, by the way, is the largest airline market in the world. If you
Right.
just add
And
up
what
all
was it
the
last week? IAG CEO Louis Gallego hinted that the New York London market is IAG's most profitable route. So I would not hesitate. I would be comfortable assuming that it's also a very profitable route for Virgin as well.
for sure, that's got to be. I'd have to believe that's the number one profit center for them. In terms of routes, we were playing a game. Speaking of that IAG list, their little mystery game they had of the top most profitable markets for them. We were playing a game on LinkedIn. I think Brian Summers, our old colleague at Skift, posted something, and we were all trying to guess the top 10. I think we came up with well, I think everybody knows New York is number one. This is IAG, by the way, we're talking about
Yes, yes.
British Airways and Iberia, et cetera. I think we came up with, they said Latin America was the number two market. I think Buenos Aires was what the consensus was there. So, but we had a little fun doing that. But back to Virgin. The only other thing I was going to add about them is interesting fleet choices. I believe they have A350-900s. They're getting the 1000. Well, they have the 1000s, right?
A330-900s, A350-1000s.
A330-900s.
Yes.
Okay, so no A350-900s, just the
Just the
1000s?
1000s, yes.
Just the 1000s. Okay, and then they have the 787-9s, which has got to be a great aircraft for them. And yeah, interesting. Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if they need all three for an airline of that
No,
size.
yeah. I mean,
But
they've only got 40
I
to
kind of
50 planes, but
yeah, I kind of say
a streamlined fleet has never been Virgin Atlantic's a forte for sure. I mean, in the
no.
past,
They've made a lot of bad fleet decisions historically. I mean, if you looked at all the four engine aircraft that they had up until like relatively, that was a big problem of them. Big problem for them well into the 2010s. Having A340s and you wonder too, like the A350-1000s. They always have this instinct, and you understand it. We're at Heathrow. We have all these capacity constrictions here. It's so slot constrained. So we just got to buy the biggest aircraft. We have these precious slots. So let's get the biggest aircraft we can find, 380s and the 350-1000s. But yeah, you wonder if they really need it. Like, could they just get by with, maybe just 787-9s would be ideal for them. I
yeah.
don't know.
Some nines, some tens, maybe, yeah, exactly. But
Yeah, or you can upgrade to the 10 for some train. It doesn't have the greatest RAM, but you can do a lot of transatlantic with
oh
the
yeah, the
10s, the
10 would
787
could
10s.
be fantastic for just like London JFK. I imagine you get that extra
Yeah, yeah,
lift,
yeah.
extra seats without the extra payload. Anyway, we digress. I want to one last thought on Virgin Atlantic. I spoke to Weiss after they did this SAF demonstration flight, and sitting here in the U.S., it felt like a stunt to me. He corrected me and said it wasn't a stunt. But looking into it, he legitimately, Virgin is pushing the UK government to do something about sustainable aviation fuel, and I have to give him, U.S. airlines have done the same. United did the exact same thing 2 years ago with a flight from Chicago to D.C. when they were pushing the U.S. government for incentives to develop the SAF industry. So you really can't blame them for doing it, though. In typical Virgin fashion, it was much more of a party than the United flight. But we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's the Virgin brand for you. It's you didn't run into Mr. Branson, did you?
I did see Mr. Branson. I didn't get a chance to chat with him, but he was there. He was on stage. He definitely joined Weiss and some of the government officials there in New York.
Very cool. Yeah, I remember back in the 1990s when Virgin was trying to block the American British Airways. At the time, they were trying to do it turned out that joint venture was blocked twice by the DOT. Eventually, on the third time was a charm for them, and they have the JV going today. But back when Branson was trying to block that in the 90s, he came and testified before Congress, and I was a college student in Washington at the time, and I showed up at the hearings, and I got to meet him afterwards. I thought that was pretty cool. And I was asking him questions about Heathrow and all that. But yeah, it's great that you got to see him last week or this week.
Definitely. With that, let's take a quick break, and we're going to stay in the UK and talk about EasyJet. So Jay, EasyJet presented their was it their full year or just their fiscal fourth quarter results? How did they do?
Yeah, well, they have a weird fiscal year that runs through September, so it's like goes October through September. So it was their annual results. Now they had back in mid-October, they already disclosed their sort of, we'll call it calendar fourth quarter results, calendar third quarter results, the big summertime quarter, July, August, September, which is, it's their fourth quarter, but we'll keep it simple and call it calendar third quarter. So they already disclosed it. There's really nothing too new as far as numbers go, other than to say, if you add it all up over the past 4 quarters, their annual, their operating margin was a rather lackluster 6%. Nothing. Ryanair was, I think, 19%. And someone pointed out it's never fair to compare anybody to Ryanair. So I don't want.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah, we don't want to make the standards too high here, but 6% is it's rather mediocre.
It is meta, Yeah, I gotta agree with you that even if it's not Ryanair, I mean, it could be. Yes. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, right? And then but if you look at so why 6%? They had a great summer. So obviously they've got winter problems, and this is a story. This is a kind of a theme that recurs in our podcast is European carriers with wintertime problems. I used to call it like chronic seasonal disorder or something like that. It seems to afflict most European carriers. But just to put some numbers to that, so in the fourth quarter of last year, which is the start of their fiscal year, EasyJet actually had a negative 8% operating margin. In the first quarter, this is all calendar first quarter this year, January, March, negative 15%. So that's a lot of red ink for the winter.
That really is, yeah. And this is even an airline that's been pushing, they're like, we're doing more winter seasonal bases in Lisbon and Portugal and pushing into Southern Europe more. Yeah.
Yep. And you can see why they're doing that, right? I mean, they kind of need to.
Absolutely.
But no evidence of it working yet. Now they, in the second quarter, they climb out, they did a positive 9%. And then they just have, summertime. It's gangbusters, and it's positive 21% for the summer, which again, it's I don't want to compare to Ryanair, but for the record, Ryanair 35%. So it's but we'll leave Ryanair aside. So that's kind of EasyJet's story. They've had I think they've definitely hit a home run with this EasyJet holidays division. They're doing really well with that. It seems to be doing very well.
But it's still a very small part of their business right now, even if it is doing well.
It's still small.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's still exactly. It's still small. Now they're growing it. I think they started out, a lot of the uh tourist source origin traffic is at this point still UK. I think they're trying to, get more out of France and Germany. They're kind of building that out and other markets. So that may become a bigger profit contributor over time, which will be helpful. And they do have very good slot positions,
Yes.
whether it be Gatwick or Milan Malpensa, and they recently
Amsterdam, Lisbon.
Amsterdam, exactly, which we know. I know you've been covering this extensively, Ned. Amsterdam is only becoming more and more constrained. So yeah, that's all that is helpful, but it does create a little bit of awkwardness in that you have these privileged positions at slot controlled airports where the whole idea is that, yeah, you can get yield premiums, you can charge higher revenues, but at the same time, you're trying to be a low cost carrier, prioritizing low cost. So they kind of have to make that, trade off. Yes, we're going to operate at Gatwick. It's more expensive, so we can't really be low cost like Ryanair is low cost, but we'll make it up on the revenue side. So, but it's a little bit, of a non-traditional low cost carrier in that sense. They're definitely chasing more revenue, chasing the higher yields.
Right,
So
no, for
that's
sure.
yeah.
Did they talk anything about how? So I mentioned it. They're sort of seasonal bases and their pivot more towards Southern Europe during their call. Did that come up? Is that doing? I mean, you would think it would do well, but like we just said, it's not producing the results that one would hope yet.
Yeah, I mean, some of that is new. They have new base, I believe, down in Spain. I forget off the top of my head which is it Malaga, I can't remember, but yeah, they're doing some of that. They actually said that they're pushing for more flight rights to North Africa, which is also a market that tends to do relatively well in the off peak. Although, I mean, those are, a lot of that is summertime tourism too, but you get more, I would say, kind of visiting friends and relatives traffic and whatnot. They recently got access to the very, very large Germany to Turkey market. So they seem to be excited about that. And yeah, and you're right. I mean, they're definitely trying to address the seasonal issue. But we'll see how they do this winter. But yeah, ultimately, ultimately this is summer airline at the end of the day.
Right, exactly, and that's I think why many people consider EasyJet a potential takeover target in Europe because of the seasonality that they have and sort of their inability to produce these really strong full year results.
I always thought it was like if you think about like a world without airline foreign ownership restrictions. Imagine an airline like Sun Country merging with EasyJet. Like Sun Country, it's Florida, Caribbean, peaks in the first quarter, and then you get EasyJet. That's all.
And you send all your planes over to Europe for the summer.
Exactly. Wouldn't that be cool? Or like, yeah. Now they actually Transavia, which is Air France's low cost carrier, Air France KLM. They, Transavia, Transavia France. They actually send a lot of their 737s over to Gol in Brazil in the because they have a counter seasonal thing. So there is some of that. The problem is it's just the Brazilian peak season is just not that big. It's not they I always thought it'd be interesting if there was an airline that in the US that needs a lot of capacity to Florida in the winter that might do something with a European airline, but you never really see anything like that. I'm not sure why, but maybe perhaps one day.
One day, maybe. Yeah, those pesky foreign ownership restrictions. I know a lot
Yeah,
of people want those to remain in place, but that's a story for another podcast for sure.
What would we call EasyJet? We call it Easy Country or
Sunjet?
Sunjet. Yeah, there you go.
Nice. Nice. Well, Jay, with that, we're going to take a wrap. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. You can always reach me at er@skift.com. You can reach Jay at js@skift.com. Jay,
yeah, likewise,
Ned.
Okay, I would say goodbye in a British accent, but I'll just stick to a typical see you later.
Sounds good.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Airline Weekly Lounge podcast. Check out airlineweekly.com for a new issue every Monday and updates on the latest airline news throughout the week.